So I'm a good way through the machining of all of these sapili to form these independent frames that all go around the central post, if you like, in the middle of the doors. I came up with this design that one frame would be double rebated over another section of frame here, and the idea is that all of the faces are the same size and each one is spaced a particular amount to allow for a tiny bit of expansion and contraction, but it should be fairly stable once they're all sealed and polished. This is the model that I made originally to work out exactly how the system would work, and it's worked out really well for me. I can still use that as a rod, and then obviously we machined the sapili to match the components here. You can sort of see that there. Then, as I say, I'm doing two of these doors. It's a pair of doors and they're both exactly the same. We'll have a rebate on the closing where it closes, obviously. I've used one door as a full-size rod, so I've set it all out with all of the dimensions. So the pencil marks are all on here, all the series of everything. So I use this as a rod, I mark one, I set the saw up, and I do all the mitres in a series. I don't do one and then the other, they all get done as a set. So here's a set, this is the smallest set here. So this is frame number 4. So it's 1, 2, 3 and 4. This is the easiest way to do it, it's the best way to do it, and you know, all things are going to be equal. I've built a tiny bit of tolerance in. I've got about 1 millimetre of tolerance between the frames, and I think that's going to be pretty good.
Once I had all the mitred components made, I took them back to the rod, I laid them all out, each individual frame size, just to check them prior to gluing them all together, and I was really pleased that all of the mitres were really nice and the tolerances worked out really well. Incidentally, when I was doing this, I had noticed that the Capex that I was using, which is a good mate of mine, Joshua's, it was actually cutting the mitre slightly out, and I called him and I said, have you noticed there's some issues with the Capex? And he said, it did get sort of knocked a bit the other week on site. So if you haven't seen the video that I did where I sort of straightened it back up, maybe you want to check that out as well. So the next step in the process, once I had all of the components perfect as I wanted them, I put all of the frames together. So I like to use a mitre adhesive because it's pretty instant. The mitres are absolutely perfect, so it's just a matter of setting up. What you see there is a basic jig for each frame. I just adjusted it each time, mitring them together, and then I made a big stack of them behind, which enabled me to sort of mass produce them, if you like. And because I'd worked that rod out really quite well, that everything was exactly the same. So it did seem to work really well, and actually it was one of those things I thought, oh my god, this is going to take so long, it's such a daunting task. But once I got into it, it was an absolute cinch, and one of those things that you start the day thinking, oh no, this is going to be a nightmare, and by the end of the day I felt pretty pleased with myself that I'd managed to get it done. Then, once all those frames were made, I had the job of bonding them back to the door blanks and getting them all in situ. And it was pretty nerve-wracking because I only allowed about 1.5 millimeters between each of the double rebated frames. So it was a matter of having a rod, making sure I kept the spacings all the way around. I was pretty sure my door blanks were a really good size. I checked and double-checked them, as you do. So I was working from the outside in. And the other crucial thing about this was, and this is where the rod and the model came in really important, was the fact that I was adding my rebated rails and stiles after I'd actually done all of these panels working out. So if you like, there's always a rebate holding a panel in. So it was pretty interesting to do it. and I did have a few sweats on every now and then, just trying to make sure it all went to plan, but I was pretty happy in the main. These are the spacers which I was telling you about, so these give me the tolerance in between the frames and just positions them exactly. I probably could have got away without it, but I just really wanted to make sure that the frames weren't jammed up one side and the mitres all lined through. And once I got round to doing this, it was just a matter of putting a brad in here and there to hold them. The glue is going to do the work. These brads are great. They're tiny, and basically the polisher stain seals and polishes, and as he's doing that he's putting wax and other fillers in as well, so you don't even know they're there. In fact, once the doors are stained and polished, you wouldn't even know they were there, so it's pretty good. And these are the stiles and rails that I'm preparing now, and of course they've got a rebate which goes over the panels, and then I'm forming a rebate with the Capex here, which is a really nice tool, set to the depth. There's no play in it, so unlike some chop saws, as you pull it down, if you pull too hard it will actually cut too deep. It's a bit springy, but you don't really get that with a Capex, which is absolutely perfect for this job. So that was that, and it was nearly ready for final assembly and cleaning up.
So I'm a good way through my front doors. I've got two of the sides, the insides of the doors, all finished. I've got that one completely trimmed, flushed off, and that's what I'm going to do here now. So that basically involves cutting the stiles off, flush with the bottom rails, and then I'm going to use a trimming router which has got a bearing on it, and that's just going to take off that millimetre or so that the stiles hang past the lippings for cleaning up. And then once all that's done, I'm going to use a really tiny radius here all the way around the door, just to give it that nice soft edge. You really don't want a sharp clattering edge on there, just give it that. So the first job is to use the rail saw with the rails. Now this is something which I think a rail saw really is perfect for, because it's easy to set up, it's deadly accurate. I've got a brand new or a resharpened blade in here, and for me to cut these stiles off dead flush with the rail, it's a simple operation of just letting the blade come down. I've got the clamps just loosened off underneath. Important to clamp something like this, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the blade is pressed against that bottom of that rail there, and I'm going to run it through dry, so off if you like. So I'll just run that through there, and if the blade is turning, you know you're touching. So if the blade's rotating, you know you're touching. When I do the other end, you might see that a bit clearer. So let's get this one done. I'm setting the depth of the blade just beyond the thickness of the stile, so I don't go into this nice lipping on the top, albeit it's flush. So that's the first thing, is set the depth and get down here so I can see. And there's perfect there. We'll bring up the slider. Another mill. Oh, it's perfect. Check the clamps. Plug her in. Dust extraction. And away we go. Do the same the other end. Add a millimetre more. tighten that up, away we go. That's that. It's an incredibly nice cut. I mean, absolutely perfect. Now, when you use a trimming cutter, because I've got end grain here, if you don't put a block, clamp a block on the end to go into, the chances are it could split that out. So that's the first job, is to literally clamp a piece on the end, flush with it. Stop that splitting out, and then we can go for that now. So this is the cutter, and it's dead flush, it's following the lipping underneath. So everything's nice and flush. Then all we need to do is get my little plane and just to see if it's all nice and flat. So we can do all the rest of the edges now. Whack them out. So that's it, all dead flush. I've just taken a little tiny weeny shaving off there, which is probably the difference between a worn trimmer and the bearing, because obviously the cutters wear down. I quite like it like that it's not 100%. It's lovely to have a really sharp plane, just to literally go around and tickle it off where it needs it. That's all it is. It's super sharp. No tearing out, and anyone who works with sapele knows that the grain
can sometimes do wonderful things. So you'd be planing in one direction and then you just immediately turn around, or even plane in a circular motion to make it stop splitting. So the last thing I need to do is this lovely little detail here. We'll run up now. And that's it. Perfect.